All right. I was saying a whole bunch of good stuff and I was muted the whole time. Um, I'll be the first to say before we jump in, welcome. And I'm not the most tech savvy. I was talking for about 30 seconds to a minute and I don't think anyone heard what I said, but it was good. So one thing I would say is thank you for joining. And again, if, for those of you that are Zoom experts and or PowerPoint experts, you just be patient with me because I'm not the most tech savvy, but I'm here. So if you are willing to share where you're coming from, where you're joining from, maybe city or state, that's always greatly appreciated. I like to know where people are joining in. I'm in Southern California. For those of you that are in California, hey, we're neighbors. For those of you in a nearby state, I know a lot of people are from Illinois, Colorado, Texas. We have a lot of different people. Please just share in the chat below where you're joining from, and we are going to be rocking and rolling. So we're about 3 minutes in, 3 minutes behind schedule. So let's go ahead and get this show on the road. So without further ado, as you see on my screen, and if you can't see my screen or if you can't hear me, please also add that to the chat just so I can make sure I'm good on my end. But one thing I like to say, how to pay for college without going broke. If you are here for that particular webinar, you're in the right place. You're in the right place. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and start sharing some slides. Again, I'll tell you a little bit more about me as I go through some of the slides, but also wanted to talk to you about not just me, but other people that I've had the permission to share some stories about, and kind of give you some examples, some case studies, just some things that you can use for your own situation. So one disclaimer I'll put out there, and I'll summarize this is never intended to be legal, investment, tax advice at all. We are here to provide you some information that could benefit you on the college side of things, but whenever there's something that comes up related to taxes, investments, legal, you name it, any specific thing, please consult with your advisors, the people who are close to you in your circle. And if you have a one-off question, please let me know, and I'll do my best to get you some answers or point you in the right direction. But a little housekeeping, as I mentioned a little earlier, I'm not technical, okay? I'm all alone. So if you have a question, add it to the comments, and I'll do my best to answer that question. And if I can't get it answered during the webinar due to timing and things like that, I'll definitely come back to you and make sure you get some answers for your question. And your engagement is definitely valued. If you can add any input, I have a few questions that I'll be asking the group. It's always welcomed and appreciated when we can get a little bit of feedback as a speaker from you as parents. Some of you might be driving, some of you might be in weird or odd places, but I encourage you to engage if you can. And with that being said, along with engagement, if you can take this little device here and just throw it out the window or throw it to the next room. If you can separate from that device, I would greatly, I'm going to do the same thing, appreciate it. Eliminate as many distractions as you possibly can. I know with the webinar, sometimes it's hard to stay focused with family, kids, dinner, all that kind of stuff. But thank you again for being here. So the agenda is some real stories on college prep, college planning, how to pay for college without going broke. My goal for this webinar is to share with you something maybe that you didn't know, even if it's one piece of advice that you didn't know. But also my goal is for you to take action. When you learn something new, I encourage you to just act upon it, take some action. And that's the only way it really works. And I always tell people this when I speak in person or via webinar. General advice is great. Okay. YouTube, Google, Facebook forums, groups, webinars is great, but it's nothing compared to personal advice or personal guidance. So general advice is always good, but personal recommendations is 1,000 times better than any specific general advice that you can obtain. So just remember that as I go through certain things, always make sure what I'm sharing with you, you can use for your situation. Also, for those of you that have to leave, you have to leave a little early. Here's you can take a picture of this page. You can scan that little QR code, or you can type in that particular link, I will say, to be taken to a page where you can book a strategy session or a conversation on my calendar so we can talk a little bit more if that's something that you want to do. If you have to leave early and you need some answers to specific questions, feel free to use this information here. And this will come up a few more times throughout the actual webinar. So as I go through and jump to more slides, I'm going to talk now about me, my situation, my reality. And just for a lot of you guys, as parents, I'm a parent. I understand some of the challenges, some of the struggles. It seems like just yesterday, my kids were this small. They were this big. And since then, they've grown. This is a few years ago. And I don't have to tell you that, they grow fast. And one of the reasons I have these pictures, this slide here, is just so you understand that I'm also a parent, parent first, husband first, parent first, consultant, advisor. Some people may consider me an expert second, right? But as we were planning and going through the college process for our children, it seemed like college was far away, right? We thought we had it under control. We were saving money. We were putting some money aside for college. But what I have learned as we were going through that process is that we weren't keeping up with the cost of college. It was constantly rising faster than our savings were. And then before you knew it, college felt, less. It felt like tomorrow, like, oh my gosh, the stress kind of just continued to grow. High school decisions, right? What high school do we send our daughter to? What classes does she take? Deciding classes was high stakes all of a sudden, right? Where middle school was totally different. We thought about college, we thought we were good, but now all of a sudden it just got real. So we had no real roadmap. We had a lot of questions, a lot of worry, and we wanted to do things right. We wanted to save money and figure out what was the best route to take where it benefited her, our daughter, and it also benefited us. So we had other kids that we needed to be able to send through college. So I began to learn a lot. I took classes. I was already in a consulting space, but I took a lot of training, a lot of experiences. And this was about 10, 15 years ago. So fast forward about 15 years ago, that is my daughter, who is at the time was a high school graduate. And that was my son next to her. And here they are right there now, a more present time. He's now a junior in high school. So we're going through the whole process with him again, or a second time around our second child. We're now doing today, we were working on letters of recommendation, building out his resume. We're doing college visits. We're at Georgetown a few weeks ago. So he's a junior, rising senior. It's real for me too, just like it is for many of you here. So I'm going to share with you what we're doing, what we've done, and what I've helped probably close to 1,000 other families with. And most of them, pretty much all of them, I would say, have had a pretty successful college journey with their kids getting into great colleges, with them saving on what they're paying out of pocket for college. And many of those students are in their careers, working, happy, doing some good things in the world and making an impact. So, with that being said, one of the main reasons, again, as I bring this up here, oh, you didn't see that picture again. I'm not the most tech savvy. My apologies when it comes to that, but that's my son and my daughter today. And I just wanted you to know again, I've been in your shoes, okay? College prep strategies for hundreds of families so far, experience in scholarships, financial aid. If you have a question, use me as a resource, okay? Just know you being here, and I don't know how many webinars you've joined. I know a lot of parents, a lot of you guys at this time of the year, probably joining a lot of webinars. You see them maybe all through social media. I don't know how many people say reach out to us just because. If you have a question, you're not alone. I just want you to know, reach out to me and I'll do my best to get you some answers and give you some guidance. And it doesn't always have to be a client advisor relationship. It's just if you have a question, you're not alone, and I'll do my best to get you some answers, regardless of where you are and your situation. And this was about 4 years ago. So this is when my daughter actually graduated high school. We dropped her off on college campus. And for those of you that are emotional people, moms that are here, dads that are here, if you are a crier, you might shed a tear or two. Here's a little video of my wife and daughter, that I would say that last hug before we left her on campus. And it's a lot of emotions, right? Some people wait till they get to the airport. Some people, drive away in the car and they start to cry. But it gets real, right? You go through all this planning, a lot of ups and downs emotionally. You're in so many different places, excited, anxiety, stress. And then when it's all said and done, you're dropping your child off and you're leaving them to grow up, right? To be in a new place. And if you do it successfully, you will have some peace of mind. The only thing you'll be crying about is leaving them. Everything else to be taken care of as far as the costs, the location, the college, all those important things. So I just say all that to mention that again, I've been in your shoes. This is my daughter at our dining room table, and she's in a, she's sitting down with all her letters and a lot of her offers on the table. And I don't really use these images to gloat or to brag, but I just really want you to understand the message here is that as you notice some of the letters and the scholarship offers, and she applied to several colleges, got accepted to many colleges. She's a double major. She's a film major and a business minor. And so you want your child to have options, right? So if nothing else, if you learn nothing else in this particular webinar, it's important to remember that you want them to have options. The more options they have, the less you pay out of pocket. Pretty simple. The more options they have, the more leverage they have, the more control they have over their future, and the less you pay out of pocket. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides, but it's really important to understand. Okay, so, and then with that being said, as I went through the process, me personally, and maybe simultaneously a little bit before we actually had to go through the process, I've been fortunate to help a lot of other people besides my daughter. And here, if for those of you that like information, some real world strategies and things like that, you can always visit my YouTube channel, Cash for College, AGACP. This is not a pitch, but it's just a resource for you. I talk mainly about the financials, scholarships, financial aid, things like that. You can always check out my channel and, have at it with all the information available. And I try to upload at least once a week. My schedule doesn't always allow, but I do, add some information there to simplify a lot of this information for those of you that are in this time horizon as far as college. So with that being said, as I mentioned, my daughter is not the only one. She was a few years ago, and I'll give you guys an update on her towards maybe a little later in the webinar. But last year, or 2024, we're still getting class of 25 data. But last year, 2 years ago, 2024, we were fortunate enough to help a lot of students. And this is a snippet. It's actually a long sheet of colleges that our students have been able to get accepted to. One of the cool things about this here is where every year this list is growing. More and more colleges we're able to get our students accepted to. So when we work with families, we have a lot of experience with specific universities. Sometimes we have connections with some of their counselors, the enrollment committee. We know what they're looking for in a student, maybe, some things that they want this year that they may not have wanted last year. So when you always hear people say, I'm surprised this kid or my kid didn't get accepted to this college, but last year this kid did, and my kid has better grades. A lot of times it really comes down to institutional priorities, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides. So here are a few award letters that were shared with us from some of the families that we've been able to help more recently. Different colleges and different places. This is a cool little text that I got from a client. And for those of you that saw the client testimonial videos, I don't know if you had a chance to check that out before you joined, but I've asked a lot of my clients in the past to share some information. But this gentleman sent me a text. His daughter went to LMU to study journalism. She's now at USC, but her dream was to be a sports commentator. So he sent me a picture last year's March Madness, and she had the opportunity on the court to, have her shot at being on TV and interviewing other people, including some players, which is really cool. So he sent me that text, and I'll talk more about Trent a little later on. She's one of 3 children that he sent through college and that we were fortunate enough to work with. But always cool to hear that students are doing well post-college, right? Not just getting in, not just saving parents, mom and dad money, but also after college, they're doing pretty well in life. And hopefully, again, I can share with you some tidbits to, put you on that path. So stick around, right? Settle in and stick around in this particular webinar. If any of these things resonate with you, for those of you that are here, if you don't mind, I'm probably going to remove my camera really quickly, only because you guys are not here to look at me. You want to see my screen. So let me go ahead and remove my camera. I'm still here. Obviously, you can hear me. But settle in and stick around, right? I'll go over some of the things that are bold. If you don't think you're going to qualify for aid, right? Need-based aid, and you are focused mainly on merit opportunity. Maybe your income is too high, your savings is too high. I'll talk a little bit about financial aid, and you might be surprised on what you actually can qualify for. But if you think initially you won't, you're in the right place. If you may not have any money saved, you're in the right place. That's okay. We're going to talk a lot about strategies to reduce your out-of-pocket costs, meaning we want to help you save on the cost of college, not just for college. Many of you are in a space where you probably don't have enough time to save for college, and you're like, okay, how do we cut the cost? How do we make this thing more affordable? So if any of these bullet points resonate with you, you are definitely in the right place. Settle in and stick around. And one thing I'll add is in my 10 plus years of consulting, speaking, webinars, workshops, things like that, there's typically three types of parents, three types of people who come to these events, who register, who sign up, who join, and I'm gonna kind of mention those three. And one of those three is probably you, right? And I'll probably speaking directly to you. One is the person who just wants information. We're just gathering information. This is our third webinar, our third event, so they're information gatherers, which is totally cool. I think I have a lot of good information for you if you're that person. And then number two is a person who wants to gather enough information so they can do everything on their own, the DIYers. We just want to make sure we know what we're doing, and we're going to pretty much do everything ourselves, which is totally cool. Hopefully you get what you need out of this webinar to put you in a better situation. And lastly, it's the parents who actually want someone to help them. They may be shopping for a consultant, an advisor. Hey, I'm looking for someone to help us, and we're just looking for the right person. And again, we have that for you as well. So regardless of where you are in your process and who you are, as far as what I just described, I just want you to feel comfortable knowing you're in the right place. This information may not be for you if you are an adult student, right? If you're someone who's looking to go back to college, or you have an adult student as a parent, this information is more for high schoolers that are eventually going to be graduating, maybe late middle school, early high school, or students that may be transferring from one school to another. But for those of us that have adult students or adults ourselves looking for ways to pay for school, you can always reach out to us one-on-one. But this particular webinar may not be ideal for you. Okay, so what I encourage you to do is be open-minded and be willing to learn. And if you are, compelled, definitely take some action and reach out to us. So with that being said, let's get into it. Oh, there it is again. If you have to leave early, there it is. So why college? Why college? What is it about college that still makes it worth pursuing? Why is a college education or a college degree important for any of you that are here? I'm going to sip my water. But if you can add to the chat, why? Well, what is one thing that makes college valuable to you, or in your opinion, for your student? As I sip water, I'm going to give it 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. And for those of you that added a comment or a chat, thank you. I appreciate that. For those of you that didn't, I appreciate you for wanting to. So when it comes to why college, here are a few reasons that I think college is important. And some of you may also feel the same way. You want your student to get a good job, right? Or have a good career, better opportunities. Knowledge is power, or knowledge is potential power, depending on the person who has that knowledge. Status. You graduate from USC or Harvard, Stanford, Harvey Mudd. You're in you're part of the elite group. Not too many people can say they graduated from those universities. To be well-rounded. This is wasn't super important to us as parents. We want our students to have a diverse understanding of the world, of life. Our daughter studied abroad in Europe, which is awesome, from California. So we want them to be well-rounded, and then build the right connections. A lot of people say, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have the connections or the network, right? Not just my college education, but the network and the connections to obtain a certain skill set. Some of us have students that one day may be our future architects or engineers, medical professionals. And then, I would say, not most importantly, but it all kind of boils down to making more money and having our students ideally enjoy life. It doesn't mean if you go to college and you graduate with a degree, you're going to be happy, but we want to give them that assurance that they can always fall back and have a good opportunity of being happy with a college education and all those other things that I just mentioned. So earning more money and being happy, and these are some of the reasons, but not all the reasons, that a college education is important. So with that being said, when it comes to the whole college process, there are some unique challenges that every family faces. We face many of these challenges. A lot of the families that I've consulted with had one, maybe a few, or all of these challenges. But these are some of the more prominent challenges that I've noticed from the families that I've had the opportunity of meeting and working with, including myself. So let's go over some of these challenges and how we can overcome these challenges. And I think once you do that, you're in the best position possible to pay for school, literally without going broke. So number one challenge is the dilemma. And I'm going to give you a little bit more on this in future slides. But when it comes to the dilemma, what I mean by that is the balancing act for many of you, many of us here that are considered middle class, right? Middle class meaning we have enough money, right, to live, maybe to get an extra topping or two on our pizza, right? We have enough money to do those things, but we don't have enough money to just write a check for any amount when it comes to college. We're not in a position where we want to pay 80 grand, 90 grand, even 50 grand every single year. Buying a nice car, maybe a Mercedes, every single year that our child is in college. But we also make a little bit too much money where we don't qualify for a lot of financial help and or assistance. That's the dilemma we're in. So how do we pay for college? The common question a lot of these families have, and you may have some of these questions, how do we pay for college and still save for our retirement and still be able to help out other family members, including maybe our aging parents or other students in the household? How do we pay for college and pay off our own student loans, right? We're still dealing with our own loans and our own debt. How do we help our kids out? And how do we maintain the same quality of living, the same quality of life while we're paying for school? So if you're in that boat, again, you're in the right place. But that is a challenge that many middle class parents have and are dealing with every day. Now, these essential philosophies, I call them the essentials, the three keys that I feel like every family needs to understand. Every family that I've ever worked with, families that I'm talking to here via webinar or even in person, I try to get you to understand this. Now, when I say be open-minded, try not to fight me on this. And if you understand these philosophies and you decide to own these philosophies, it will put you in a better situation when it comes to paying for school without going broke. So this is not going to be theory driven completely, but these are important to understand. So number one, colleges are businesses. Remember that. As you go through this process, do your best to set your emotions to the side, right? Treat this like you would any other large business transaction. Now we know it's not just a business. Colleges are institutions of higher learning, and a lot of them do great things and produce great people. But also remember, they know how great they are too, and they exploit the vulnerability in many parents, students, families. And you just need to keep your business cap on as you go through this process. Colleges are businesses, and you have something of value to offer those businesses in your student. Now we just got to make sure we position the student the right way to where they're going to be more desirable, more valuable, and earn or get more opportunity at specific institutions. Number two is saving on the cost of college is equally, right, if not more important than saving for college. As I mentioned earlier, many of you here may not have had the ability to save money for college. Life just didn't give you that opportunity. But just you're in, have peace of mind and know you're in the right place, because I believe, and I'm going to talk more about saving on the cost of college, not just for college. And then lastly, how you pay, right, can be 10 times more significant, more impactful than how much you pay. Right? Think of a mortgage, right? If you get a mortgage, a great deal on a property, but the mortgage is ridiculous, it doesn't really help, right? Your payment is still outrageous and you may not be able to afford it. So how you pay is also important when it comes to not just how much you pay. So the proven process that we follow, the three areas I would say, and I'll throw this out there on the screen, is there's three primary areas that hold this whole process together, the foundation, the pillars, we like to call it. From left to right, it is getting accepted into college. That's pillar number one, student positioning. Pillar number two that works simultaneous, or I would say in conjunction with that, is financial aid, grants, scholarships, discounts. And then lastly, it's anything that's remaining. You do all the right things on the admission side, all the right things on the financial aid side, and then if there's any left over, any remaining amount, you have to have a really good strategy on how you're going to cover that cost. So this is not necessarily new to you as far as information, but each family is going to be either somewhere in this particular journey with one pillar, maybe a few pillars. So in our process, we like to work with the students first, while we are also simultaneously, or maybe right after, working with the parents on the financials. So the student positioning is more about learning who the student is. What is, what are some of the things they're interested in? Where they're going to be strong? And I'll talk more about student positioning in a few more slides. And then with the parents, this is important to understand. If college were to begin tomorrow, what are you going to be expected to pay? Very, very, very important to understand that. And then more importantly, understanding why that amount. Is there anything that you can do to reduce that amount? I'll talk more about that in the upcoming slides. And like I said, lastly is the funding. So we follow the plan strategy: position, locate, apply, negotiate. Position your student and or your finances for maximum opportunity, right? Maximum aid, right? Maximum acceptance. And then locate the right private scholarships as well as universities where your student is going to have the best shot at winning. We want your students to be valued. We want them to have an unfair advantage. And they get that when they're moving and locating the right opportunities. Apply. We have an acronym that we use. It's called SHARP, but we have a process that we apply to not only the applications when it comes to college applications, but also scholarship applications to increase our students' chances of winning those opportunities. And lastly, negotiate. Do we need to submit an appeal? Do we need to strategically ask for more money? How do we do that? And it goes in a lot into a lot of the things that I'll be talking about in the upcoming slides. So that is the first challenge, is the dilemma, addressing that kind of middle of the road. How do we do this and do this? How do we do all these things? Where do we begin? So the next challenge is going to be not understanding how to get free money. So here we're going to talk a little bit more about financial aid, and this is financial aid 101. So I'm not going to bore you with things that you already know. When it comes to financial aid, remember, we're talking about financial aid. We're not talking about FAFSA. We're talking about how to get more aid, not necessarily how to submit an application. So as you see on the screen right here, this is a real student that we had the opportunity to work with. And this is a student in California. There's Cal State Fullerton, a state public college here in California. And where I really want you to focus your attention, as you can see in the far right of the information, the estimated cost of attendance for this family is about $27,000. And the graduation year between 4 and 6 years is 23% and 69%. Super low, right? 4 years, less than 3 out of 10 students are graduating. Very low. But this is where a lot of parents and families, focus their attention, because they look at the cost, right? It's less expensive. Maybe we don't have to, we don't have to live on campus. We can commute. So we want to make sure we address these types of this thought process that many of you might have. And I kind of want to shed some light on certain things and debunk certain myths. So understanding financial aid, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner where I have that box right there, notice their estimated SAI. SAI is the Student Aid Index, formerly known as Expected Family Contribution, or EFC. The SAI is for lack of a better way of putting it, and without giving you a long story, it's the minimum that a college is going to expect you as a family to be able to pay. So when you complete your FAFSA, you complete your financial aid forms, the government is going to give you a number based on your income, based on your assets, right? This is how much we think you can afford. In this particular situation, the family's SAI initially was $36,000. Now, this family has an income of right around 240, 260,000. Maybe just call it 250 a year. So this is what the government believed the minimum they could afford to pay, $36,000. Now, also look at the before and after, right? So this is the raw information that they provided us. And then with our recommendations, we're able to get that from a 36,000 to a 0. Now that's pretty aggressive, right? And depending on everyone's situation, I wouldn't say everyone is in the same boat. But even if you can shave off 15,000 or 20,000 and become more aid eligible at specific colleges, it's worth it, right? It's worth to cut $15,000 where applicable. And again, it's not the situation in every case, but in a lot of families that I meet with that don't really understand how financial aid works, we notice a lot of costly mistakes. So we want to address those costly mistakes before they happen, and they cost you a lot of money, thousands of dollars every year. But also notice, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, at the very bottom, the total family contribution is still $27,000. So even though they were able to get their SAI from 36,000 to potentially 0, the total family contribution did not change. It did not change. At this particular university, they're still looking to be pretty much a full pay family. And this is where we're going to focus our attention on that pie chart right there. And the reason being is because the school will only meet their need at about 1% on average. The average family is only getting 1% of their needs met. So no matter how much the family was able to demonstrate a financial need, the school wasn't going to be able to help them out. Not only were they only meeting the need at 1%, but of that 1%, 74% was gift aid and 20, maybe about 28, 26% is self-help. Self-help is loans, work study, things like that. So when you look at that and you look at this particular college, the spoiler alert is school selection is a big deal. It's really important. And I'll talk again more about that in upcoming slides. But just know that all aid is not created equally. Just because you have high income doesn't mean you won't qualify for need-based aid, but also just because you qualify for need-based aid doesn't always mean you're going to get it. School selection is really, really important. So here's what I also want you to look at. So the same student, but now we're looking at a different university. We're looking at Duke University. Now at Duke University, in that far right-hand corner, the estimated cost of attendance is close to $90,000. Most parents will not entertain Duke University just because of that cost. But also look at right below that, the graduation rates are about 88% and 96% between 4 and 6 years. Huge difference. They're getting almost 9 of their students to graduate in 4 years, 9 out of 10. Huge difference between 88 and 23%. But also look at the aid eligibility. This same family, the SAI went from $36,000 because they're using a different method, a different form to calculate the aid eligibility, down to $19,000. The same family, same income, right? Same assets, went from a $36,000 SAI, right? Initial SAI to a $19,000 SAI. And with certain recommendations and certain implementations that they wanted to do that, they can get that down to close to $2,500. Pretty insane. $2,500. If they were to get their SAI down to $2,500 and get their student into Duke University, a $90,000 university is less expensive than a $27,000 state school. Think about that for a second. And your student is graduating in 4 years. So if you look at the very bottom, the total contribution goes from $19,000 to $2,600. Even at $19,000, it's a better deal than what they were going to get at Cal State Fullerton. So my point by saying a lot of this is, for those of you that are new to this process, the question is, what schools are on your students' list, right? Do not shy away from those more expensive, more selective, maybe more prestigious universities. Your student can get accepted into some of those colleges, and many of them do, with the right strategy, with the right process. It actually makes sense for you to consider those colleges based on just the pure fact that you can save thousands of dollars every single year and still get your student an opportunity that most students are not able to realize. So for those of you that are from North Carolina, that are North Carolina fans, UNC Chapel Hill, this is just an example, okay, that I'm using for this particular webinar. I'm not a Duke fan, but I just wanted to paint the picture and give you the contrast between the two types of universities. So forgive me for those of you that are not Duke fans, but for those of you that are unbiased or neutral, I think you understand the messaging here. So notice that Duke, it meets the family's need at 100%. Now, again, I'm not saying all families, all students can get accepted to Duke, but it's worth the try. And again, with the right strategy, it doesn't always have to be Duke. It's tons of colleges out there that are in this situation or this category that can put you in a better situation. So the biggest challenge is not understanding how financial aid works. So this is a high income family that we had the opportunity to work with a few years ago, Lacey. And I'll kind of speed through this a little bit, but initially when we met with this family, their EFC, when we use EFC, was about $98,000. They live in Laguna Beach here in California. Very nice family, pretty affluent family. But we got them from $98,000, as you can see circle right there in red, because I know it's a lot of small information on the screen. And we got them down to a $37,000 EFC, from $98,000, same student, to under $40,000. Now, the cool thing about that, what it was able to do for them, the daughter went to Chapman University here, again, in SoCal. she was able to receive about almost $34,000 in scholarships and financial aid. Prior to us having the conversation and or meeting, she was not aid eligible for anything. She wasn't going to get any money at the time. So we were able to save them a substantial amount because Chapman University was a pretty expensive college. So they went from a 98,000 to a 98,000 to a $37,000 contribution, saving them about $20,000 a year on college expenses. All we really did was review their information, made, updated or corrected some costly errors and mistakes, guided them through the appeals process and verification process, updated the FAFSA, right? And helped them secure some scholarship opportunities. Pretty simple, and I make it sound simple, and it is. You just have to understand, again, how to access free money, how financial aid actually works. So this student now is in a much better situation, and she's she's actually in her career. But the story, the example is always relevant because we come across families like this every single year. And I don't want you to be one of those families who are making some costly mistakes when it comes to the FAFSA or financial aid in general, understanding how it works. So the biggest financial aid mistakes out there that we see every single year, and number one, or starting with number two, is going to be not completing the FAFSA. So think of FAFSA like you would think of taxes. Okay. So, and I'll throw up number one right there. So think of FAFSA like taxes. You got to do it. And sometimes it's easy to do. You can do TurboTax. You don't always have to have somebody do your taxes, but it's the planning that goes into FAFSA. It's the planning that goes into maximizing your students' financial aid, where a lot of families miss the mark. They miss that opportunity. So A, if you do the proper planning, B, it makes it easier to complete the FAFSA and put you and your student in a better situation. And then also the thing to remember is, even if you would never qualify for aid, the more information you provide the university as far as your financials, your information, because it's a common question that families have is, should we even complete the FAFSA? We won't qualify for anything. Many of you here may feel and think that way as well. But the more information you provide, the more likely that university will understand and could accept your student and provide merit opportunity that can help lower that bill. So we've seen this trend. I've noticed this over 10 years ago, that more and more colleges are accepting students that may not check all the academic boxes, but they're less financial aid dependent, right? So the student can handle the rigor of the curriculum or the courses, but the family has the financials, and a lot of times it increases that those students' chances of getting accepted. Not every university is doing that, but a lot of universities we've noticed have started to make that shift with accepting more students that are full pay and less students that are relying heavily on financial aid. So when you provide your information by completing the FAFSA, it actually helps your students' chances, and they withhold merit opportunity. Many colleges withhold those merit dollars until they get the FAFSA and the financial information. So complete it, but do the planning prior to completion. So that's one thing that I really wanted you guys to understand. And this is also always important: a $6,000 miss on financial aid. If you miss out on $6,000 a year in financial aid, just multiply that by 5 years. Most students are in college for about 5 years. That's about $30,000, right? We all can do that math. 6,000 times 5, 30 grand. But what did that actually cost you? At a 6% rate of return, if you have a 401k or some type of account at work, or maybe anything else that you might be invested in, it actually costs you about $128,000 over 30 years. So you overpaid for college by $6,000 a year, but now you're in retirement, right? And you're $100,000, I would say, less, in addition to the $30,000 that you overpaid. So it definitely matters when it comes to overpaying or making certain mistakes, because in the end, it costs you more money in the long run. And this is just $6,000. What if it were more like $10,000 or $15,000 per year that you're overpaying? Think about the impact that can have on other financial obligations that you may have in the future. So we want to avoid that at all costs. Now, the next challenge that we're going to focus on is not knowing how to get your student accepted, right? And many of you are here, so kudos to you that are here that don't really know how to get your student accepted or the admissions process. And it's kind of confusing as a parent, because we had the same questions, like, where do we start? Do we start with our high school counselor? What do we do? So what is the admissions process like? And is it the same at all colleges? For those of you that are looking to send your kid to an Ivy or maybe a UC, what are they looking for? Are they looking for the same thing or is it different? Do we have the time to learn and coach our child, right, on how to get in? Do this, not that. More of this, less of that. What about our high school counselor? Most high school counselors are overwhelmed. They are a great resource and sometimes a great place to start, but there's certain conversations they can't actually have with you, especially as it pertains to the financials, the paying for college, but then also they're overwhelmed. Many counselors are just overworked and overwhelmed when it comes to the number of students that they actually have to work with. They can't give each student the personalized guidance and information that they would need to be in the best situation. So just understand that having a counselor is great. They're great people, but you don't want to put too many of your eggs, I would say, in that basket. And does your student know how to be competitive, right? Do they know how to stand out at that particular university? So what one university might be looking for, another may not be. And you just want to make sure your student, your whole process includes strategies and ways to help your student stand out and get them beyond just the initial conversation. So having good grades, having a good GPA, all those things are super important. But when they're competing with another student who also has good grades, right? Who also has good academic stats, what's going to make your student different than that other student? That's what you want to understand. That's what you want to know, because at most colleges, especially if they're selective, they're going to attract students that are pretty bright, pretty smart, but you need to make sure your student is standing out over the next. So what is the most costly mistake, right, that families make every single year? Drum roll, it's pretty simple, probably simpler than you think, and it is choosing the wrong college. And I alluded to this a little earlier, as I said, it was a little bit of a spoiler, but not just when it comes to the financial aid side of things, which is also really important. As you see on my screen, choosing the right college would increase your students' chances of getting money and also can increase the amount of money your student may get. But also choosing the wrong college can be costly in other ways, right? We want it to be the right social fit, the right academic fit, the right location. Last thing we want our student to do is come home too soon because they were unhappy where they initially started. And that happens a lot. It happens too often. But choosing the wrong college or changing their majors and things like that can be a very costly mistake. It can cost them more time. It can cost them, just more travel. It can cost money. So choosing the right college, the right list of colleges in the beginning is the best way to mitigate that potential risk. So this is a student that we also had the opportunity to work with a few years ago. And what we did for her is we helped her build a smart list, right? A strategic list. Pretty strategic. When I say strategic, we wanted to add colleges that might compete with each other for the same student. And this is all based on her interests, the family's, I would say, priorities, including budgeting and things like that. And we wanted to make sure we had a combination of schools that met everyone's needs. Then we helped position her in such a way that made her, I would say, desirable to these colleges. And then we wanted to, I would say, appeal and or negotiate once we receive one offer, use that to get more money at another competing school and so on and so forth. But here are some of her results. She initially was offered 25,000 from one college, and then she was offered about I would say about 31,000 from another college. You can see that there from Whittier. So from Cal Lutheran to Whittier, and then I think she eventually, I know for sure, she eventually decided to go to University of Redlands, and now it's about $37,000 that she received. But the idea here is the more options, again, as I mentioned earlier, for my daughter, that your student may have, the better opportunities and fit that they're going to find when it comes to budget and or just social environment. We want your students to have control. We want them to have leverage. And the best way to do that is to have a strategic list. This is going to increase the odds of money, happiness, acceptances, you name it. So a couple of things that we want students to understand and focus on as they go through the process is when I meet families that have a list already and which is great to have a good list to start from. But most families that I meet that have a college list is usually colleges that the student is really interested in. Maybe the college has a major that the student may be considering, or it's in a specific location that the student may be considering. But we want colleges on that list that might have the ability to reciprocate that interest. So if it's all one-sided, the student is so happy, so interested, in this particular college, maybe it's brand recognition, maybe that college has been around in the family and you guys have been a fan of that particular school, UNC or Duke, USC or UCLA. But we also want to have colleges where we feel like our student is going to be desirable, right? They're going to stand out based on who they are as an individual, based on some of the things that they do from an extracurricular, aspect. We want to have colleges on our list that we want to, attend, but also that are likely to really want us. So a couple of things to focus on. If you're someone who takes notes, this is a good time to start taking notes. Is legacy and institutional priorities. As I mentioned earlier, institutional priorities are the most important thing to a university. Some years they may be focusing on college students that are less financially dependent. Maybe one year they're focusing on having a Spanish commencement speaker. Maybe one year they're focused on having a tuba player in the band. But every year, their priorities could slightly change. And there's going to be certain parameters that are going to be consistent. But you want to make sure you're appealing to the people who are reading those applications, who are making those final decisions, and make sure your student is positioning themselves in such a way where they have a stronger chance. They're more they stand out more. And it's important to know, again, beyond GPA, beyond academic stats, that they're telling the right story. So a lot of students have great stories to tell, and sometimes, often they choose the wrong story for that particular college. And this is really important for their top choices. Also, when it comes to college fit over prestige, make sure we're not focusing just on brand, right? We're focused on the best fit. That college is a great fit for us, and here are the reasons why. Not just brand recognition. Early engagement with schools, the more value, not the more valuable, the stronger your student is as a student, right? Academically, socially, their accomplishments, the more I would say desirable they are as a student. And coupled with the more selective a university might be, it's super important that your student is engaging with that school as early as possible, that they're demonstrating interest. Now, demonstrating interest means different things at different colleges, and there's different ways to demonstrate interest. For any of you that want to talk one-on-one about that, please reach out to me and we can always schedule the strategy session. But this is very important. The more the university feels that this is where the student wants to be, the more likely they are at not only accepting that student, but working with that student when it comes to the finances and the financials. This is what so many families miss. They don't really start, most families don't demonstrate interest until they get late in the process. Start that early, even if you are just considering a university and you're not super focused on that university just yet. The more selective that college is, the stronger your student is, equals demonstrated interest, because that college knows that your student has other options because they're strong. And that college also must protect their yield. They must protect the students that they actually accept. They want most of those students to say, yes, I will be attending in the fall. And if they don't feel like your student is that student, they will waitlist your student. They will reject your student. So we want to eliminate that and basically flip the script, right? Make those colleges feel that you are interested, and you might be. And it's going to work, I would say, wonders as you get further into the process with other colleges that might be being considered. So leverage underserved, right, majors and or programs, build a personal brand. And if you guys have been in multiple webinars, you probably heard that consistently. This is really important today. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, academic stats were pretty much what made you stand out. But now today, it's about your students' personal brand. So with that being said, also their application and the story behind that application, the context, right? Who is that individual? Let's get to know her or him and what makes them unique. What's going to add to our diversity here at this particular campus? So these are the things that most families do not focus on. And I wanted to mention here that you pay a lot of attention to these things and take. And for those of you that have rising seniors, 4 months from now, your student is going to be having probably most of their applications submitted. So if you haven't started or gone down this particular process yet, this is the time to do it. Let's take some action. And yes, let's move in that direction, because time is precious. So this is a client that we had the opportunity to work with. I mentioned Trent a little earlier. He's the one that sent me the text of his daughter work, on campus, and he had 3 children. stay-at-home wife. And we were successful with all three children. And Trent is, small business owner, hard worker, and just really trying to figure out how do we do this, with all of our kids. I mean, I don't want to do just, what we need to do for one and not have enough for the others. How do we do this? And I'm happy to say that all three of his children are in a great place, a great situation. And I think between all three of his children over 4 or 5 years, his daughter's in graduate school, he's probably paid about 15, maybe $20,000 total. So I'm never here to make a promise that you guys are going to have, scotch-free, debt-free degrees, but to have three kids successfully navigate, the college process when you are upper middle class and you only pay a little bit of money out of pocket is a huge thing. So for his situation, his students, his oldest son, Clyde, attending UC Irvine and now works for Microsoft. Claire, his daughter, is the one that I talked about a little earlier, who went to LMU, is now in graduate school at USC. And then his youngest son, Caleb, is still in school. I believe he's a senior or going to be a senior this year in college, and he goes to Columbia. So very successful process, but student positioning, list building is really where a lot of the magic happens, and what a lot of you guys are here for it. It's an admissions thing, but it definitely has an impact on paying for college without going broke. So I just wanted to share his story a little bit, and then also here's a family that we've had the opportunity. I knew personally, and we didn't work with, but I had the permission to kind of share, their story, and they're close to me, more of a relationship, not so much of a client or a family that we've been able to serve, but they did not work with anyone, and they pretty much rely solely on their private school counselor. And without boring you guys with all the details, these are some of the results that they had. So their student applied to about 9 colleges, and they were only accepted to 2. I knew the family could qualify for financial aid. Dad was a small business owner, so they had a lot of opportunity to qualify for aid, but they're a full pay family. No need-based aid, no merit scholarships, and the student is actually going to be going to school across the country at a school that he was accepted to, and pretty much out of 2 schools, this is where he's going to be attending. Situation could have been a night and day difference, right? Could have been completely different when you don't rely solely on, I would say, your high school counselor or just your own intuition. So I encourage a lot of you here to seek advice, whether that be with us or any other group, but just get some personalized guidance, because you hate to be in a situation that's less desirous. You hate to sit next to somebody on a plane, come to find out you pay 10 times more than they did for the same seat. You just don't want to do that, right? So now every situation is going to be fairly different, and here is just kind of a little bit of some research we've done over the years, just to kind of share the difference between working with someone versus doing things on your own. For the average family, they need to spend over 200 hours learning the admissions, the scholarship, the financial aid, all that stuff that we just talked about. Whereas they, may have to invest about 50 hours, I would say combined between the parent and the student, working with someone who actually knows what they're doing and has some experience in this particular process. Personalized support, right? Organize timelines, lower your stress level, and versus high stress level when you're trying to carry the load and do everything yourself, especially if you have multiple kids. So just putting this out there that it is important, and I would say it pays dividends in more than one way when you work with someone for personalized guidance or support versus trying to carry the load completely on your own. And I know many of you are capable of doing it, but is it worth it in the end? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So again, if you got to leave early, there's that information right there. Scan it, write it down, and I'll try to add something to the chat where you can actually check it out. But moving on to the next challenge right here. So when it comes to the challenge, and this is really important, why a lot of us are here, is not knowing how to fund or pay for college, I would say, the best way possible. Not knowing how to fund college. So I've done several webinars and several lives and things like that and make content on ways to pay for college. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here. But the impact that college has on other financial priorities. So when you see here, this is an example of a mom and dad, age 45 and 46. Anticipated retirement is 65, right? Current combined income, 175,000. Some savings for retirement, about 138,000. Two college-bound children, one who is a high school senior, one's a high school sophomore. 5 years at a state school for one, 4 years at a private school for the younger one. Impact about $344,000 between those two kids over 9 years of college, right? This is what a lot of families, this is a situation that a lot of families have gone through or have been in. This is an example, but it's a average, or I would say pretty common example here in the United States. Two kids through college, about $350,000 in today's pricing. And we want to assume that the cost of attendance increases at about 6%. So if you're in California, cost of attendance is going to be a lot more than it is in maybe Wyoming or Nevada. Like if you're in New York, it's going to be much more expensive than it's going to be in Arkansas or Alabama. But just kind of give you an idea, cost of attendance, just, for sake of the conversation, rises at about 6% on average. Now, the impact that that actually has is closer to $800,000 in retirement, right? So when we are paying for school, a lot of us are faced with, how are we going to pay? Are we going to pay with our income? Are we going to pay with some loans? Or is our savings going to be enough? At least I was in that situation, and I was thinking a lot about that. But the opportunity cost, whether it be for retirement or anything else, 344,000 costs you about $800,000 and lost money for other things such as retirement, for example. So we're just assuming a 5% return on your investment. And many of you here, over the years that you've been working, between now and when you retire, probably pretty confident that you can earn at least a 5% on average. Now, child one, child two, you see the cost there on the screen, increasing at 6%. Parents want to retire in 20 years. Yeah, it costs close to 800,000. So understanding how to pay for college to mitigate, right, this particular situation is really, really the essence of how to pay for college without going broke. Now, I won't make this promise to you guys all here, but I know what if I told you that you can actually literally pay for college and have all your money there and back for retirement? Now, that for a lot of people can sound way too good to be true, but it's not. It's just understanding strategies, understanding some of the resources that might be available to you, including scholarships. You can actually pay for college regardless of where your student might attend, regardless of how much it may cost. And this is where I was saying how you pay is more important sometimes than how much you pay, because you could potentially pay and get all of your money back or have it available for you when you retire. It's all about understanding the right strategies, the right processes, and doing the right things and starting at the right time, right? So starting when I say understanding, researching, moving in the right direction at the right time. Now, as I mentioned, I've done tons of webinars on this particular topic, solely this topic, but things that I've covered and talked about when it comes to ways to pay for college is federal loans. I've talked about the benefits of using Fed loans, the drawbacks of using Fed loans. And right now, there's a lot of things up in the air when it comes to Fed loans. Some changes, some reform looks like is happening, restrictions. There's a lot of changes that seem to be coming in the next maybe year or two regarding federal loans, but it's still something worth considering and understanding. Not just Fed loans, but also private loans. And I'm not going to talk about the drawbacks and the benefits right here on this webinar, but anyone that wants maybe a copy of this particular webinar, the recording that I did, I believe we have it, we'll send it to you, or one-on-one we can speak. But private loans, right? When it comes to private loans, what are the best options? Are there any loans where, you don't have to be completely liable, right? Are there loans that are beneficial for you and your student? Or, what are the rates like? What should you do, that one versus this one? What are the pros and cons? And I talk a lot about that in that webinar that I did. Also, for a lot of us here, we have college savings. We have 529s. What is the best way, the best time? How strategically can we use our savings to stretch our dollars, right? Understanding your options. So there's a lot of ways, the messaging, there's a lot of ways to pay for school, but what's the best way for you? What's the best way for your situation? Home equity. We understand that rates are ridiculous right now. So refining, and a lot of people, the last thing they ever want to do is take money out of their property to pay for school. And I get that. But for some people, it may be beneficial. It may be the way to go. There are pros and cons to everything that you do. For those of us here that are small business owners, there are a lot of advantages, a lot of opportunities. You as a small business owner can pay for college and, walk away scot-free. I mentioned Trent a little earlier. Or not, you can't go completely debt free, but or no, nothing out of pocket, I would say. But he sent three kids to college and probably should have paid well over $500,000. And I think he's only paid about 20,000, 15 to 20,000 for all three. Really good situation, and he's not in debt. They're not in debt. So understanding ways that you can use and leverage your small business is also really important. And then also, we all want to use private scholarships. Now, the issue with private scholarships is most families get burnt out. They don't know, they don't have a process that they're following, and therefore they don't get the results that they're looking for, and they typically don't stay consistent with it. The families that I've met, that I've worked with, that stay consistent, a lot of them get a lot of money out of scholarships. A lot of times they're sophomore, junior, senior year in college, because so many of the families who were excited about it early on kind of phased out, once they weren't getting the results. And then the other families kept it going, and opportunities started to present, I would say present themselves. So when it comes to private scholarships, there's several private scholarships out there. This is a huge and important part of the college funding and private scholarships. So with us, just so you understand this, as far as our process, we want to make sure you understand how to find, how to identify opportunities for your student. As I mentioned earlier, locate, right? And then also locate the best way to pay for school. Is it loans? Is it your savings? Is it your income, your cash flow? Is it a combination of those things? So one thing, as I talk, I'll go back a little bit and I'll talk about the college funding. When it comes to paying for school out of pocket, cash, income, just so you know, for anyone here, there's a lot of ways to pay, but I'll be one of the first to say that that is usually one of the worst ways to pay for college, is through your income and or through your cash flow. I don't know your situation, so I can't confirm that, but I just trust me when I say figure out other ways and alternatives, but using your income and or your cash flow is one of the worst ways. The second worst way is to use idle savings. Okay, so we'll meet one-on-one and talk about that if you have a question about it. But I just wanted to make sure I mention that. There's so many families that are using their income, that are using their idle savings, that are not specific or earmarked for college to help pay for school. And that is one of the worst things you can do. It costs you, as you guys saw earlier, lots, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in your retirement and or other priorities. So when it comes to private scholarships, as you see on the screen there, this is just a small list of the types of scholarships that might be available to your student. Now, one thing I'll tell you, and I mentioned to a lot of other families, when it comes to private scholarships, the important thing is a process and consistency. Having the right process to find and identify scholarships and consistency are the key. Now, you don't want to try to bite off more than you can chew, overcommit, because that's where you get burnout. Even though your student may need a few $1,000s, you do not want them to have to apply to a few thousand scholarships. You want them to apply to fewer scholarships, but the right scholarships that they're going to have a likelihood, a strong likelihood of winning. Couple that with the strong, or what we call it, a sharp application. That is the recipe for success. And then lastly, as I mentioned, consistency. So for all the families that we work with or that we even just consult with, we want to make sure you have the right foundation and understanding of the scholarship process. And for a lot of the families that we consult with, and this is at no cost to you, we send out scholarship information on a regular basis. Every month, we send out a list of maybe 20 to 40 scholarships that families can, look into and apply to. But we also want you to understand how to identify those opportunities for yourselves, so your student can be in the best situation as well. So if you have any questions about private scholarships, please feel free to reach out. Now, when it comes to what is it like to follow our plan or the plan, this is what it looks like on the screen. What we want to do, what you want to do, whether you work with a consultant or you do things on your own, is you want to find and discover hidden aid opportunities, right? That before and after, the SAI. This is what we look like now. This is what it could be. And what do we need to do to get it from here to there? Or maybe you realize that you can't, but it's great information for budgeting, for having the right expectations, and then to plan accordingly. Number two is you want to build the perfect college list for academics and for financial aid. And they both are super, super important. Three is position your student as a top candidate for the selected colleges and negotiate like a pro. Lastly, as I was talking about, is the funding. Fund with a strategy. The reason why so many families end up in debt is because they do not have a strategy. Okay, they do not have a strategy. A strategy is what cures everything. Knowing your resources, knowing your options, knowing what the pros and cons, what you can do, what you can't do, what you shouldn't do, that is super, super valuable when it comes to avoiding debt. Okay, so just understand that there are families that pay for college and drown in debt, and there's families who pay for college and thrive. You just need to understand the difference between what they do, right? And strategy is a big part of it. So again, last couple years, I said 2024 wasn't the only year that this is the list. It's a huge list, and I think it's too small to see the font of all the colleges that our students were accepted to. 2024, we got almost $8 million in scholarships, and I think we're about 500,000 or so more than that this year, and our goal is to get to 10 million. But we've been doing this consistently and increasing our numbers, as year in and year out. So we know a thing or two when it comes to getting opportunity, getting scholarships, and we have tons of families that are really, literally paying for college without going broke, and it really comes down to the strategy that they use. The last thing that I want to mention is on these calls, you join these webinars, and in our webinars, we like to give you a lot of real life examples and talk to you about certain things. But sometimes that can put you in a situation where you're more confused, not knowing what to do now. Okay, well, I got all this information, sounds good, but what do I do now, right? So a lot of you might have these questions, or maybe you should have some of these questions. What are our expected costs? What scholarships can we actually apply for? Just so you understand, what the private scholarships, it starts today. Today. It actually started a couple years ago for those of you that have high school students, middle school. But if you have younger students and students that are near college, it starts now. Do not wait until you need the money. It's less pressure, more opportunity if you have a process that you can follow and run with on a consistent basis. It starts now. A lot of times you can have $20, $30, $40,000 before college begins in scholarships if you understand and know how to apply the right process. What actions should your student be taking right now, extracurricular wise, right? Letters of recommendation, building their resume, maybe LinkedIn or social media profile. What should they be doing now to still be a kid, to still enjoy life, but also to maintain a level of competitiveness when it comes to certain universities and college? Remember, for those of us that have rising seniors, we got about less than 4 months before we actually have to start applying to colleges. Can we qualify for aid? Maybe. You might be surprised that in your situation at the schools that you're considering, aid might be on the table. And I would encourage you to add those colleges to your list, even though your student may or may not be big on that particular college just yet. Can we manage the expenses without affecting our retirement? If so, how? And then lastly, is working with the college consultant beneficial? Is it even worth it? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe not. Okay. So for many of you here, working with a college professional or a consultant may not be worth it. You might have everything you need, as I mentioned earlier, to DIY it. Some of you are here to get information, to learn how to do things on your own. Some of you are here to, maybe find someone to work with. You need to go through the process of meeting with specific people to decide whether or not working with someone is worth it in your situation. So this is about a month ago, and this is our daughter on her last day, and she was graduating school. Pretty cool experience. It seems like it was just yesterday we were dropping her off. That's my family. That's her in her apartment. And we're happy, right? We're happy. So she's in a much better situation, and not better, but she's in a great situation, I would say. And that's the experience that so many of our families have that we've worked with, and so many of you that will have, as long as you have and you apply the right process. Get your kid in, right? Spend as little bit of money as possible, and having them be happy. And when they're happy, you're happy. So The next steps, what do you do now, in my humble opinion, is especially for those of us that have rising seniors, schedule a time to meet. Let's chat. Let's talk. This is not a sales call. This webinar was not a sales webinar. And what we're doing for a lot of our families that are meeting here is we want to over deliver. We want to give you a lot of value without asking for anything in return, without asking for any money. Maybe you can refer people to us. Maybe you can, refer people to the webinar. But we want to meet with you, I would say at least 2 times, to give you a game plan, to give you something that you can use to benefit your situation. And you don't have to pay us for that. But we understand that a lot of you have questions that need answers. A lot of you have concerns like, like, what do we do? How do we do it? Who can we trust? Who can we work with? We just want to be a resource, as I mentioned earlier, to many of you, where we can give you the guidance, we can give you a foundation, and from there you're educated enough to make the next steps to, whether that be working with a consultant or doing things on your own. But just want to let you know you're not alone. A lot of those reports that I showed a little earlier, I want to make that information available to you as well. So for those of you that have some, questions or concerns about the financial aid, where do we stand? I tell every family this: if college were to begin tomorrow, you need to understand what are you going to be expected to pay, and if there's anything you can do to reduce that amount. Know that as soon as possible, as early as 7th grade. So if you guys, some of you here have a rising senior, you're kind of late in the game, right? Not to say you haven't done anything, but you're later in the process where timing is not necessarily of the essence for you. So really important to take action. And what you would get by, meeting with us is we'll give you some real understanding of your college expected costs and your expenses, right? We'll give you insight to whether your current school list will cost you more or save you some money, clarity on what age you may qualify for, right? How to increase that amount, and a game plan. This is the most important thing. We'll give you a game plan that you can take action on. Every meeting we have is really meant to add value to you. So we'll tell you this is what you should do, right? This is what you might want to consider, but definitely do not do that. So we'll give you a little bit of insight in the game plan based on our experience, not our expertise, that can benefit your student and your situation. We'll also be transparent with you. If we felt that we can help you out, we'll let you know. But that comes later in our conversations. Our first meeting is always meant to learn about your student, to learn about your situation, to answer your questions, and to point you in the right direction. We usually try to meet maybe once or twice to give you a lot of substance, a lot of information, a lot of value based on your unique situation. And then from there, you may realize you never have to work with an advisor, a consultant, because you have enough to move in the right direction on your own. And we want you to feel comfortable and confident having those conversations. So, oh, here's a few families that have met with me in the past, have some nice things to say about me via Google. Couple reviews. I am honored to be able to have a lot of these, experiences and positive feedback. Just want to let you know, as a parent, as a advisor, a consultant in this space, I get it. Last thing you want is to be, for me, last thing I want to do is sell a family something that they don't need. Last thing I want to do is try to help a family reduce what they're going to pay for college, but sell them something that costs $10,000 to do that. That is not how we operate. We do not do that with integrity. We want to help you and meet you where you are. And if that's information only, we're totally happy doing that because we believe that, we're paying it forward and we'll get it back tenfold in the future. So with that being said, free college strategy session. Your situation is definitely unique and you need specific guidance based on that situation. And yeah, we will love to have you. So for those of you that are still here, thank you for being here. For those of you that have engaged, I appreciate you. And thanks for bearing with the fact that I'm not tech savvy. I do look forward to meeting some of you on the other side, one-on-one, and kind of learning about your student and your situation. And also sharing more about my situation and my student and my family. So with that being said, have a blessed rest of your evening. Thank you so much for being here. And like I said, I hope to meet many of you in the near future. Thank you. Did I get a hand raise? Somebody raised their hand. Sandra. Sandra, I'll probably reach out to you if it's okay with you after the webinar, if you can still hear me. Um, you know what? I think I can make it to where you can talk. Can you hear me? Are you able to answer or ask any question? I think you're muted right now. Okay, you're unmuted.
Yes. Can
Hi,
you hear
Sandra.
me?
Yes.
Hi. I was wondering, is there can I get a copy of I would like to share this with my son's father. I have an upcoming senior. Um, and I was wondering if I could get a copy of this seminar, this program, this one, the webinar, I mean.
Okay, so yeah, we'll get you. Okay, so two things that I think I heard is a copy of the webinar,
Yes.
the recording. We'll send you an email, I believe. If it's not me directly, I think my team will send you an email of the webinar. And then, did you ask for a copy of something else? What was it that you asked
No,
for?
I was just wondering how soon is it that I can get a consultation?
So we can schedule it. Well, I don't know what my calendar looks like, and you have the link right there on the screen that you can scan, and it kind of gives
Okay.
you my availability.
All
So
right.
what we encourage you to do is, depending on where you are in the process, you may want to do that sooner than later, because there's certain things that are time sensitive. But
Mhm.
take a look at that availability, and then you can schedule it as soon as. And I think it's pretty open. I think we typically keep our schedule. I keep my schedule open when I do the webinars to make myself available for the families. But yeah, that should be relatively easy to do.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Nope.
And
Where
this
are you
was
joining
so
from?
informative.
Thank you. Thank you. What state are you in?
I'm in Houston, Texas.
Awesome. Awesome. I love people, good people from Texas. So I'll be in Texas in a couple of weeks. So hopefully the weather is kind and it's nice. But thank you for joining. Thanks for being here. And I appreciate, the questions that you had. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All righty. You have a good night.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.